Today, we bring you inside a Senate hearing where top federal officials are exposed for hiding over $1 billion in missing funds, recorded calls, internal emails, and overdue reports reveal a shocking conspiracy. And the senator's response leaves them with no escape. Watch closely, because what happens next changes everything. The morning sunlight barely reached the polished floor of the Senate hearing room. But inside, the tension was already palpable. What was supposed to be a standard budget oversight hearing was about to become historic. FBI Director Kash Patel and former Attorney General Bondi entered confident, prepared with talking points, spreadsheets, and assurances meant to impress committee members. They believed that routine questions and familiar oversight procedures would carry them through. Senator Chris Van Hollen, however, had something different in mind. Known for meticulous preparation and sharp questioning, he had reviewed every document, internal memo, and email relevant to the FBI's budget submissions. His plan was precise: a single, high-impact question that would force a public accounting of discrepancies so significant that it would shock everyone watching. Patel and McDye began the hearing with composed remarks, highlighting the Bureau's operational efficiency, financial stewardship, and commitment to compliance. Bondi spoke first, emphasizing the legal frameworks guiding federal budget processes, and Patel followed with assurances about the Bureau's fiscal responsibility. To an observer, it seemed standard procedure: officials defending their budgets, Congress fulfilling its oversight role. But Van Hollen was ready. He watched silently as they presented figures, cross-referencing every number with internal reports he had obtained. His strategy was clear: a single probing question designed to reveal not just errors, but systemic obstruction. The first few minutes were calm, almost deceptive in their normalcy. Bondi and Patel fielded basic procedural questions with practiced composure, answering in legalistic phrasing that sounded plausible, yet masked underlying issues. For many in the audience, the tension wasn't obvious. But for those tracking the documents Van Hollen had obtained, the cracks in the narrative were evident. Then came the moment that would mark the hearing forever. Van Hollen leaned forward, voice steady, commanding attention with a precision that left no room for evasion. "Director Patel, Attorney General Bondi," he said, "the FBI's budget submissions show $1.2 billion in missing funds and reporting, 54 days overdue on federal requirements. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Patel froze for a split second. Bondi's hand instinctively moved toward her notes. The question was sharp, direct, and perfectly timed. Cameras caught every expression: the slight stiffening of Patel's shoulders, the flicker of concern in Bondi's eyes. What they thought was a routine hearing had become a moment of accountability with high stakes. Bondi quickly tried to regain control. "Senator, we have been complying with oversight requirements and have submitted reports in accordance with procedure." Van Hollen interrupted, calm but piercing. "The reports were 54 days overdue, and the submitted numbers conflict with internal DOJ communications. How do you justify these delays and inconsistencies?" The room fell silent. Committee members shifted in their seats, reporters raised eyebrows, and cameras zoomed in to capture every reaction. Patel's carefully rehearsed narrative faltered. Internal emails and recorded calls of it Van Hollen had obtained from whistleblowers made it clear that Bondi and Patel had coordinated strategies to delay oversight and obscure the $1.20 billion budget gap. Emily Carter, observing from the public gallery, scribbled notes furiously. She had followed federal budget hearings before, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for this level of exposure. The documents revealed coordination to mislead Congress, attempts to run out the clock on oversight, and strategic obfuscation that went beyond legal loopholes. Van Hollen didn't pause for reaction. He produced a recording and played it aloud, Bondi instructing Patel, "Legal is whatever we can defend publicly." The room seemed to shrink under the weight of those words. Every attendee, from staffers to reporters, understood the implication. This wasn't budget mismanagement, it was deliberate obstruction. Patel's expression tightened. Bondi's confident demeanor cracked ever so slightly. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every hesitation. Van Hollen's plan was working flawlessly. He had transformed what they thought would be a routine hearing into a high-stakes moment of accountability. Committee members leaned forward as Van Hollen continued. Which statement was false? He asked, directing the question toward Patel. For the first time, Patel struggled to respond. His rehearsed talking points failed to reconcile with the weight of recorded evidence. Bondi attempted to intervene, but her efforts only highlighted their coordination, inadvertently confirming Van Hollen's evidence. The live broadcast ensured that millions watching understood the stakes. What should have been a procedural review had become an unfolding drama, exposing the gap between public statements and documented reality. Patel and Bondi realized, in real time, that this session could end careers and it very well would. Emily Carter felt a mixture of disbelief and fascination. The hearing was not just political theater, was a masterclass in preparation, strategic questioning, and the importance of accountability. Van Hollen had used precision, timing, and evidence to achieve maximum impact, showing the power of oversight when wielded with intelligence and thoroughness. By the end of Part 1, the stage was set. Patel and Bondi's carefully constructed defenses were under siege. The audience, committee members, and the cameras all waited for the next moves, the detailed exposure of evidence that would ensure. This was not just another oversight hearing, but a historic confrontation in congressional accountability. The atmosphere in the Senate hearing room had shifted completely. Patel and Bondi had entered confident, armed with spreadsheets, talking points, and rehearsed explanations, but now every subtle movement was scrutinized. Senator Van Hollen's question about the $1.2 billion discrepancy was only the beginning. The evidence he had obtained was comprehensive, damning, and undeniable. Jasmine Crockett was not present in this session, but the methodical precision of Van Hollen mirrored her own style in prior hearings. He didn't rush, he didn't dramatize, he simply laid the foundation of proof, letting the facts speak for themselves. The missing funds, overdue reports, and recorded conversations between Bondi and Patel revealed a coordinated strategy to obstruct oversight. Patel tried to regain composure. Senator, the FBI has been diligent in managing its budget and ensuring operational effectiveness. Reporting delays are due to administrative backlog, not intentional misrepresentation, he said. Van Hollen's response was sharp but calm. Director Patel, the reports were 54 days overdue. Internal emails suggest deliberate delay tactics. Can you account for these instructions? Bondi jumped in, attempting to shield Patel. Senator, any communication suggesting obstruction is taken out of context. We have been following procedures diligently. But Van Hollen's preparation left no room for deflection. He produced a series of internal DOJ emails, each highlighting coordination between Bondi and Patel to delay submission, avoid scrutiny, and manipulate reporting to Congress. The documents were time-stamped, verified, and meticulously organized. The committee room was silent as the recordings played. Bondi's own voice could be heard instructing Patel. Legal is whatever we can defend. Publicly, the moment crystallized the accusation. These weren't administrative errors. They were deliberate actions to conceal information from Congress. Patel's hands tightened around his notes. Bondi's smile faded. The room, now fully aware of the gravity, seemed to lean in collectively. Journalists typed furiously, observers exchanged glances, and the cameras captured every micro-expression. Emily Carter, in the gallery, reflected on the gravity. Here were two high-ranking officials, charged with protecting and managing public resources, exposed in a matter of minutes for attempting to manipulate oversight processes. The $1.2 billion discrepancy, the overdue reports, and the deliberate obstruction painted a stark picture of accountability failing at the highest levels. Van Hollen didn't pause for reactions. He meticulously presented each piece of evidence. Emails coordinating delay strategies. Records showing the FBI's reporting 54 days behind federal requirements. Financial discrepancies totaling $1.2 billion in unaccounted funds. Recorded phone conversations confirming awareness and coordination of obstruction with each revelation. Patel and Bondi's defenses faltered. Bondi attempted to intervene multiple times, insisting that procedures had been followed, yet each attempt only reinforced the evidence against them. The live broadcast amplified the impact, making it clear to viewers that this was not an ordinary procedural discussion. It was an unfolding exposure of systemic obstruction. Senator Van Hollen's questioning was surgical. Which statement was false? He asked, directing the question toward Patel. Patel hesitated, struggling to reconcile the contradiction between his prepared statements and the documented evidence. Bondi's attempts to clarify only confirmed coordination, inadvertently reinforcing Van Hollen's case. The live audience, both in the gallery and at home, could sense the magnitude. For the first time, many Americans watching realized the scale of oversight and the potential for manipulation within institutions. Entrusted with billions in taxpayer funds, Emily noted the subtle dynamics unfolding. Van Hollen's approach was not about theatrics. It was about precision, clarity, and integrity. Patel and Bondi's confidence, rooted in expectation and preparation, had collapsed under the weight of documented proof and strategic questioning. As the hearing continued, Van Hollen highlighted the broader implications. This is not merely about missed deadlines or budget mismanagement, he said. This is about transparency, public trust, and the accountability owed to every American. The implication was clear. The $1.2 billion gap was not a trivial clerical error reflected. Deeper issues in leadership and adherence to legal obligations. Patel and Bondi's coordinated efforts to obscure information could have severe legal and political consequences. Emily watched, elated. The hearing had evolved from a routine review into a masterclass in oversight. The precision of questioning, the use of evidence, and the exposure of systematic obstruction made the session historic. By the end of Part 2, Patel and Bondi's defenses were under siege. The audience, committee members, and cameras anticipated the next phase, the moment when the recorded conversations and emails would fully unravel the narrative, ensuring that accountability would no longer be avoidable. The stage was set for the climax, the confrontation that would determine not only the careers of Patel and Bondi, but also send a lasting message about institutional integrity, oversight, and consequences. The tension in the Senate hearing room reached a new peak. Patel and Bondi had entered with confidence and preparation, but every passing moment revealed cracks in their narrative. The internal emails, overdue reports, and recorded calls presented by Senator Van Hollen made clear that this was more than a procedural misstep, was deliberate obstruction. Patel leaned forward, attempting to regain composure. Senator, any delays in reporting were unintentional, administrative in nature, and do not reflect malfeasance. Van Hollen's eyes narrowed. Director Patel, the evidence suggests otherwise. Recorded communications show deliberate strategies to delay oversight, obscure discrepancies, and manipulate reporting for appearances. How do you reconcile this? Bondi intervened, attempting to shield Patel. Senator, these communications were procedural discussions, nothing more. Van Hollen cut her off, calm but firm. These are not minor procedural discussions. The emails and recordings suggest coordination to mislead Congress about $1.2 billion in missing funds and 54 days of non-compliance with federal requirements. The gallery fell silent. Even seasoned staffers shifted uneasily in their seats. Reporters typed rapidly, recognizing the historic significance unfolding before them. Cameras captured Patel's subtle shifts, Bondi's hesitant gestures, and Van Hollen's unflinching focus. Emily Carter, watching intently, understood the broader implications. Public trust in federal institutions was at stake. Obfuscation at the highest levels had consequences that rippled far beyond budget reports. Resource allocation, enforcement priorities, and policy decisions depended on transparency and accuracy. Van Hollen pressed on, playing the recording of Bondi telling Patel, "Legal is whatever we can defend publicly." The words echoed in the room. For the first time, both Patel and Bondi seemed visibly unsettled. Their attempts to appear composed faltered under the weight of evidence that was both undeniable and public. Director Patel, Van Hollen asked, voice calm but piercing, "Are you suggesting this recording is out of context?" Patel hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "Senator, context matters. Certain statements may be interpreted differently." Van Hollen interrupted, voice firm, "No, Director. The context is clear. Coordination to mislead Congress is a violation, not a matter of interpretation. Were you aware of the legal implications?" Bondi opened her mouth to speak, but was stopped by Van Hollen's unwavering gaze. Every gesture, every pause, magnified the moment. The cameras didn't just capture the scene, they amplified the accountability. For millions watching, the narrative was unmistakable. The officials had been caught, attempting to manipulate oversight. The recorded conversations continued to play, providing a chronological view of attempts to conceal budget discrepancies. Each snippet added clarity and evidence, showing coordination between Bondi and Patel to delay submissions and create misleading narratives. Van Hollen then laid out the numbers. Methodically, $1.2 billion unaccounted for. 54 days overdue reports, 15 internal emails proving coordination, and repeated misrepresentation under oath. The cumulative weight was undeniable. Patel's responses grew cautious, each phrase measured for safety rather than clarity. Bondi's attempts to defend both herself and Patel became increasingly strained. The evidence was precise, public, and corroborated, leaving little room for misdirection. Emily noted the subtle dynamic at play. The hearing demonstrated how preparation, evidence, and precise questioning could dismantle even the most rehearsed defenses. Van Hollen's methodical approach highlighted the power of oversight, when paired with meticulous evidence gathering and strategic execution. Committee members shifted, leaning in to follow the proceedings. Even the gallery, accustomed to political posturing, recognized the seriousness. This was no longer routine oversight, it was a historic confrontation with consequences that would echo throughout federal agencies. Van Hollen's voice rose slightly as he posed the final set of questions for this phase. Bondi, Patel, how do you justify these coordinated efforts to obscure financial discrepancies from Congress and the public? Were you aware that these actions could constitute criminal violations under the Anti-Deficiency Act? For the first time, Patel's composure faltered completely. Bondi's attempts at verbal defense failed to mask the evidence. The room and the nation, watching through live broadcasts, understood the severity. The discrepancy was deliberate, coordination was intentional, and accountability was inevitable by the end of Part 3. The defenses of both Patel and Bondi had collapsed under methodical questioning, clear evidence, and strategic presentation. The audience committee members, staffers, and millions watching at home was fully aware that this hearing was not just about numbers or deadlines. It was about integrity, transparency, and the serious consequences of obstructing Congress. The stage was set for the final confrontation, the culmination of evidence, testimony, and strategic questioning that would determine the careers of two senior officials, the legal ramifications of their actions, and the broader message about accountability in federal institutions. The Senate hearing room had transformed into a stage of reckoning. Patel and Bondi, once confident in their rehearsed defenses, now faced undeniable evidence, internal emails, overdue reports, and recorded calls revealing a coordinated effort to obscure a $1.2 billion budget gap. The gravity of the situation was unmistakable, and every observer sensed history unfolding. Senator Van Hollen leaned forward, voice steady but commanding. Director Patel, Attorney General Bondi, the evidence is clear. You coordinated to delay oversight, misrepresent budget submissions, and mislead Congress. How do you respond under oath? Patel's hands tightened around his notes. He had rehearsed answers for hours, but none could withstand the weight of live evidence, verified recordings, and meticulously cross-referenced documents. Bondi's confident posture had faded. Even she recognized that this was beyond political posturing. It was accountability. Emily Carter, observing from the gallery, understood the broader implications. The session wasn't just about mismanaged numbers. It was about trust, institutional integrity, and the responsibilities of leaders whose decisions affect millions of Americans. The revelations went beyond the Bureau's budget. They reflected systemic issues in transparency and ethics. Van Hollen played the final recorded call. Crystal clear. Bondi instructing Patel. Legal is whatever we can defend publicly. The words echoed through the chamber, leaving no ambiguity. Cameras captured every reaction, Patel's subtle twitch, Bondi's restrained sigh, and Van Hollen's unwavering focus. The senator continued, breaking down the timeline, reports 54 days overdue. $1.2 billion unaccounted for, repeated internal coordination to obstruct oversight. The strategy was deliberate and the implications were severe. Each revelation was not just an indictment of actions, but of leadership that prioritized appearances over accountability, Patel attempted to explain. Senator, these communications were procedural in nature. Van Hollen cut him off. Director, deliberate coordination to mislead Congress is not procedural. It is a violation with serious legal consequences. Were you aware of the potential criminal implications? Bondi tried to intervene, her voice slightly wavering. Senator, our intention, Van Hollen's gaze silenced her. Every word now mattered, and the room recognized that neither rehearsed statements nor excuses could negate documented evidence. The public watching through live broadcast understood the same. The scale of obstruction was unprecedented. Emily noticed the subtle dynamics among committee members. Some leaned forward, absorbing details with analytical focus. Others exchanged whispered confirmations about the severity of the findings. It was clear, accountability at this level was rarely witnessed, and the consequences would be profound. The recorded emails and conversations demonstrated repeated coordination, conscious awareness of federal requirements, and deliberate delay strategies. Patel and Bondi had attempted to manipulate the narrative, but every effort was now exposed, leaving credibility and careers in jeopardy. Van Hollen's questioning shifted to consequences. Given these actions, you acknowledge that they could constitute violations of the Anti-Deficiency Act and other federal statutes. Are you prepared to accept accountability for obstructing Congress? Patel's face tightened. He recognized the inevitability of consequences, but attempted a final defensive statement. Senator, taken in context. Some statements may be misinterpreted, Van Hollen interrupted decisively. Context does not excuse deliberate obstruction. The facts are clear, documented, and recorded. Your actions have consequences, and the law will determine accountability. The room absorbed the statement. Committee members, staffers, and journalists were keenly aware that the culmination of this hearing would set a historical precedent. Emily reflected. The session highlighted how diligence, preparation, and evidence could dismantle entrenched narratives and ensure accountability at the highest levels by the final minutes. Patel and Bondi's defenses had collapsed entirely. The cameras recorded the subtle resignation, the acknowledgement that rehearsed talking points no longer sufficed. The gravity of coordinated obstruction, the $1.2 billion discrepancy, and overdue reports had been made undeniable. Van Hollen concluded with measured force. This hearing demonstrates the necessity of transparency, integrity, and accountability. No one is above oversight. Let this be a precedent for leadership, ethics, and responsibility. The room gradually emptied, but the resonance of the hearing lingered. Patel and Bondi's careers had been irrevocably damaged. Resignations, investigations, and potential criminal consequences were already in motion. But for observers like Emily, the lesson extended beyond the specifics. Integrity matters, transparency is non-negotiable, and accountability can reach even the highest offices when diligence, evidence, and courage intersect. What began as a routine budget oversight session had become a historic moment in congressional accountability. The evidence was irrefutable, the questioning strategic, and the consequences immediate. Patel and Bondi had miscalculated. Senator Van Hollen had executed a precise, evidence-based strategy that exposed the truth, demonstrating that oversight, diligence, and accountability remain pillars of democratic governance. The cameras stopped rolling. But the story of exposure, responsibility, and the power of truth would continue to influence discussions, policies, and institutional reforms for years to come. The hearing concluded. But the lessons endured. Leadership demands transparency, honesty, and integrity. Attempts to conceal, delay, or manipulate are no longer insulated from consequences. In the end, evidence, preparation, and courage revealed the truth, leaving an indelible mark on federal oversight and institutional accountability.